the landlubber of the average person. It looks like a flat expanse of all the sameness. But to these people here, there's a topography under that water and in the islands and the ledges and things that are out that is just as real as if you lived inland and you had your neighbor's house and you had this street and a park over here. Everything out there is named. A lot of these people who come into it from the land side or the government side or the planner side think that they're starting with a clean slate. They think that there's a clean sheet of paper and here we are, we're going to start this planning thing. But it's not the case. These places have a long history. Fishing has been here for over 400 years with Europeans. And Native Americans have been here for God knows, you know.
If you're a developer and you're going to put in some sort of wind energy or current energy and you're going to invest billions of dollars, it would be nice to know that there's not an ancient burial ground there that's at the end of the day require you to move. It would be to the federal government's advantage, to BOEM's advantage, you know, to the state's advantage and to investors and developers, and especially our tribes, to know where those sites are. And we need to do that research. But it gives us the advantage to fall back on that ancient history, but it also gives us the chance to plan for the future.
The Navy has been here really since the inception of the country. This has been our traditional training area. And so we've been doing this pretty much unobstructed for over 200 years now. In the past, we haven't had to worry about a lot of man-made obstructions offshore. With this new development in the oil and gas reserves as well as offshore windmill interest, we've had to start balancing, okay, where are these going to go? What are they going to interfere with? How is it going to impact our access? A lot of folks just think it's about ships. Well, really, we operate above the water, on the water, and under the water. Nothing worse than getting really advanced in the planning area, spend a lot of money, only to find out that, well, that's where the Navy drops some ordnance, or that's where the Navy does its submarine operations. And we believe that ocean planning is going to be the key, making sure that everybody is understanding of everybody's mutual interests and come up with an equitable solution.
There are decisions we need to make about what we want our marine ecosystems to look like. And this is unbelievable. There are zero no-take marine areas in the Gulf of Maine. There is nowhere that is completely sacrosanct. So we need these areas of replenishment that would have the chance to adapt to the change in climate and then carry the seeds for the new communities that will repopulate New England waters. We have to strengthen and bolster the natural resilience as much as possible, so we go into this time of challenge as strong as we can be.
This is indeed a time of challenge, to begin serving the seas as they have long served us. The ocean's once boundless capacity as unparalleled provider of food, of livelihoods, of the very air we breathe, is reaching its limit. But on that same troubled horizon also comes a hopeful new spirit of collaboration. Unlikely alliances of would-be rivals and competitors, those who depend most intimately on the sea, are joining forces to take better care of the ocean. One such alliance is now taking shape off the coast of New England, where the legendary winds of the Atlantic itself are pushing the boundaries of ocean stewardship.
The region from New Jersey to Massachusetts has been called the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind. So we have thousands of gigawatts of energy. And not only is the wind really strong, but it's located very close to these enormous population centers on the East Coast. So the transmission link between that big energy resource and these big population centers is really quite easy. So the opportunity, not just for clean energy, but to create lots of great jobs is really enormous here in the US for offshore wind.
The windy expanses of America's Atlantic coast are estimated to possess the untapped power to supply the region's entire needs for electricity, transportation, and heating, while cutting its greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 60%. But with the wind's great promise comes the challenge of fitting this new energy industry amid an already crowded ocean. A challenge being met by a cadre of pioneering planners in Rhode Island, the Ocean State. Rhode Island saw opportunity in the challenge, not only to identify options for developing offshore wind power, but to prepare for the full gamut of impending demands upon the state's ocean waters. The state directed funding and a 2-year deadline for the Rhode Island Ocean SAMP, shorthand for Special Area Management Plan.
When we first started, many people in the Rhode Island community said, we don't want turbines and this is going to ruin our lives. So this is how we started the Ocean SAMP process. But it's really about looking at that natural ecosystem, looking at how people are using the ocean, and protecting and enhancing what's out there now, and promoting and encouraging other activities that are compatible to those efforts.
And we looked at what types of data we would need to put together that would be areas, for instance, that are no-go sites right out of the gate. So those would be things like navigation areas. They would be unexploded ordnance areas. They would be sites with severe geological constraints, those types of things.
The team then gathered information on spawning and nursery habitats, as well as other ecologically sensitive areas and hotspots for marine biodiversity. From there, they started charting the who, what, and where of Rhode Island's maritime patrons, from Navy sailors and industrial shippers to sailboat racers, scuba divers, and whale watchers, across an expanse of ocean nearly matching the size of the state itself. But when it came to accounting for one of Rhode Island's oldest seafaring communities, there came a snag.
It's very difficult to get fishermen to say anything beyond everywhere is important. We used everywhere.
I mean, I've worked long and hard to get what I know. Somebody might like to know what I know, you know, and go up and down the dock. Every single guy might say that. He's got his secrets. Am I thrilled about having to put what I know on the table to prove it? No, not at all.
Well, I've got a lot invested in this business. To have it, pulled out from under me, I'm just going to be another one in the unemployment lines right now. Everything we have, this old dock, you won't have anybody left here if this goes the wrong way.
A few of us are going to have to pony up and say, hey, this is important to me and this is why. And somebody's going to have to show them why it's important. You're going to have to show them your grounds. So I decided I'd trust Grover and David enough to be able to give them access to that under full confidentiality, of course, you know. But hey, these are grounds that are important to at least the scallopers that I represent. You got to put your money where your mouth is at a certain point. You can't just have a bunch of guys running around saying that's my favorite spot. Sooner or later, you got to prove it. Unfortunate, but true. Sooner or later, you got to prove it.
Data that's been gathered by Deepwater Wind in terms of investigating.
Ultimately, the fishermen said to us, we want to help you site this because we want it to go in a place that's going to do the least impact to us versus you choosing a site and then we're going to have to try to live with it. And so that's essentially what occurred. They worked with us very closely, coming out with a mapping process that would allow us to focus in on sites that they had the least concern. Not that they didn't have any concern, but the least concern.
That's all we're asking for is a fair shake in this process. Just don't want to get run over by it. Most important part is identifying the right area for a wind farm, so you're not ruining the resources, you're not messing up critical habitat.
We have to have conversations within the government, and we have to have the conversations directly with the developer. But none of this would happen without this sort of process. So, yeah, I think it's overall a good thing. It gets people going round and round and getting their needs on the table. Has to happen.
But there were other voices yet to be heard, whose ancestors were the first people to ever make a living on these shores. Under the guidance of John Brown, medicine man of the Narragansett Indian tribe, Doug Harris is charged to preserve the tribe's ceremonial landscapes.
The oral history of the tribe says that more than 15,000 years ago, the ancient Narragansett lived out where the ocean is now. Those villages overnight began to be inundated with water, and the people had to evacuate. That story was shared with the people, with stakeholders at the Ocean SAMP, and a year and a half later, the geologists working with the Ocean SAMP came back and said, well, you know what you said about 15,000 years ago? Well, the geological record would indicate that at least 24,000 years ago, what is now the continental shelf was an open vegetated plain. So science finally caught up to tribal oral history in terms of the realities of the ocean.
The siting for the Block Island Wind Energy Project straddles the ancestral homeland of the Manistee Band of the Narragansett Indian tribe. From the mainland shore to Block Island and all the water between, this is their historic neighborhood, now in need of new considerations. For Native American cultural sites by law are to be protected on land and in the sea.
Part of what you need to do before you install something really large in the ocean is figure out where you're going to install it and make sure that you're not installing your equipment, your cables, and your foundations for the wind turbines on top of something that's already there. And that could be a boulder, but it also could be an important archaeological site that's submerged.
We started in a very rudimentary exercise of what's called paleo landscape reconstruction. So using the data that we had in terms of the sub-bottom data so that we could start to peel back, if you want, the sediment layers on the ocean so that we could see what that old landscape looked like. You can start to pick out the river channels, the lake beds, those areas where there might have been potential encampments.
So our challenge is to find the elements of the old paleo.
What scientists are looking for is the archaeological confirmation of the Narragansett Indian tribe's oral history. If somehow they should find the remains of an ancient civilization down there, one yet to be obliterated by rising waters and the depths of time, the prevailing textbook chronologies describing the first human footsteps in North America will be forced to backpedal some 10,000 years into the past.
We know every day history's being changed. We're finding species that we didn't know exist. Where people come from, did they come from western side of the world or did they come from the east or both? I mean, these things are always in debate and always changing. They should never be put in stone. I'm very excited that we're taking the lead in these things. We're working with scientists, universities, and we are actually being able to rely on that traditional knowledge for once and bring that to the table.
Because Deepwater Wind was committed to best practices, it has been a relatively painless process. We have questions, they try to provide answers. If there are issues that we have, they try to provide solutions. And that's a good partnership.
Certainly the largest, if perhaps the rarest stakeholders in Rhode Island were those living beneath the waters.
The North Atlantic right whale is the most critically endangered whale species on the planet. There are approximately 400 animals left. Rhode Island Sound has been home to the most significant aggregations of North Atlantic right whale ever documented. We've had close to 100 right whales feeding in Rhode Island Sound and Block Island Sound in April.
Marine mammals are vitally dependent on sound for navigating and speaking among their kind. The very sort of communication in danger of being drowned out by ships and offshore development. The right whales venturing into Rhode Island Sound to feed suddenly faced a new dilemma.
Environmental organizations raised the concern to us that our initial construction schedule had us in the water with pile driving equipment just about the same time that they believed that the North Atlantic right whale could be in the same area.
All sides were wanting to find a way forward for both wind energy and whales.
And for us, April wasn't on the table in Block Island. That was something we could not compromise.
We had the opportunity to sit down with some right whale experts from academic institutions here in the Northeast who shared a lot of data with us. And we were able to take that data, compare it to our construction schedule, and change our schedule, frankly, to accommodate the North Atlantic right whale.
We want to make sure that offshore wind succeeds in the United States. We believe that climate change is a real and significant threat, and that responding to climate change is going to require that we build offshore wind. That being said, we understand that with all energy sources, there are impacts. We have to do it right. The way to do that is to bring everybody who has an opinion about it to the table and to give them a voice, and to ultimately make your decisions based on science, based on data.
So it's absolutely good for business, no matter what business you're in. If you're in a marine business, taking into account the information so that you don't make stupid siting decisions is good business any way you cut it.
Now that ocean planning has been demonstrated successfully in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, regional ocean planning is underway in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions.
And fishermen have asked that several times, is we don't know how all these projects connect to each other. We like to see a bigger picture. There's projects proposed for Massachusetts, right on the Mass-Rhode Island border, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Virginia, all the way down the coast. They have these grand plans to put quite a few different projects up, wind farms. Fish don't know state boundaries, and they migrate up and down the coast, and our fishermen also don't know state boundaries. So many of the fishermen here in Rhode Island fish to the north of Rhode Island, fish to the south, as far down, probably up and down the entire coast, really, but the whole Northeast region anyway, you'll find Rhode Island fishermen targeting species that they look for to earn their income. I know it's a lot of work, I know there's a ton of meetings, and I get it, everyone's tired, but this is an important thing, and we can have all the fish in the world if we can't go get them because our areas are shut down, or they put all these things up in areas that we would normally go get those fish, then what good is all of this fisheries management stuff? So it's an important part for us to participate in, I believe that. It made sense to do it on a state level for us here in Rhode Island. It makes even more sense, in my opinion, to have a regional approach to that planning.
Across New England and the Mid-Atlantic, representatives from state, federal, and tribal governments are co-leading the effort to craft regional ocean plans with detailed input from stakeholders, scientists, business leaders, technical experts, and the public. These regional ocean plans will be finalized in 2016.
BOEM is very much involved in the Northeast right now and in other regions in ocean planning. It fits in very, very nicely with our mission, which is to engage stakeholders and get everyone's input on which areas are the best for ocean energy development. This large area of North Carolina, that will shrink. So what's different now is that the federal agencies are communicating much more, not only with the states and other partners and tribes, but among ourselves. And so the real benefit to the marine planning that we see is the sharing of information, the sharing of scientific data.
That data is being shared with everyone through ocean data portals. Looking through the portal, we see a multitude of ocean uses. Disposal sites, unexploded ordnances, pipelines, submerged cables, aquaculture areas, renewable energy zones, turtle migration routes, and whale feeding grounds. Looking through the portal, we see an ocean in need of sharing.
Let's say a potential developer comes in and they have a project in mind and they want to lease a specific area or offshore to do that project. The sooner they understand some of the constraints that are out there, and you'd be surprised, no matter where you look out there, there are constraints. And so what it becomes is they can focus their resources on honing into a more realistic area right off the bat. And that can save a lot of time and money and, frankly, heartache. So when you're looking at how to plan for an additional use, in this case offshore renewable energy, the National Ocean Policy is sort of guiding us to work with all constituents to find the best area with the least conflict out there with other uses.
Although we may not have a lot of coastal mileage, the coast is still a very important part of our history, part of our culture, part of our economy. If we failed to undertake this work, we would see ever-increasing tensions and conflicts over our oceans, and people finding themselves in very contentious situations, whether it's wind energy projects trying to be built in places where fishing interests don't want to see those things occurring, whether it's other kinds of energy development projects occurring in places where they might interfere with recreational activities or shipping lanes. We're just going to see ever-increasing tensions and conflicts if we don't find a way together to address them. By working together, we have much greater impact. This, in many ways, is about the rights of states. This is very much about states' rights. This is about states being able to sit as equals at the table with the feds and saying, these are our concerns. You need to hear us. We need to address them. And that, I think, is vitally important as well.
In addition to the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, the U.S. National Ocean Policy identified 7 regions: the South Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the West Coast, Alaska and the Arctic, the Pacific Islands, and the Great Lakes. The policy calls for these regions, if they so choose, to develop a plan of how their offshore waters will be developed or not. It's a plan that calls on everyone's voice.
Part of the advantage working on the water day in and day out is that you start to see the realities of climate change. We may be poor dumb fishermen, but we know that lobsters shed 4 weeks earlier than they almost ever have.